When my billionaire grandfather passed away, my family celebrated their multi-million-dollar inheritances while I received nothing but mockery and a sealed envelope marked worthless. They laughed as I walked away empty-handed, convinced I'd gotten exactly what I deserved for being the family disappointment. But inside that envelope was something far more valuable than money, a handwritten map leading to an asset so powerful they'd kept it hidden even from each other. Subscribe to our channel for more real stories of revenge, justice, and unexpected triumph. My name is Harper, and I'm about to tell you how my family's greed became their downfall. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story proves that the last laugh is always the sweetest. The morning of Grandfather William's will reading, I stood outside the mahogany doors of Hastings and Crane Law offices in downtown Manhattan, watching my family arrive in their luxury vehicles. My older brother Cameron pulled up in his new Porsche Cayenne, the third luxury car he'd purchased this year despite his struggling tech startup that grandfather had funded to the tune of $8 million. My sister Victoria emerged from a chauffeur-driven Mercedes, dripping in Cartier jewelry, her entire lifestyle bankrolled by monthly allowances from our grandfather's trust fund. Then came my parents. Dad in his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, Mom with her fresh Hermes Birkin bag, the limited edition one that cost more than most people's annual salary. They didn't even glance my way as they passed, too busy whispering excitedly about what they expected to receive. I was wearing a simple black dress from Target and flats I'd owned for 3 years. My car, a 2008 Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner, was parked 3 blocks away because I couldn't afford the garage fee. While my family had spent the past decade living off grandfather's generosity, I'd been working 2 jobs, one as a research librarian and another as a weekend barista, just to pay rent on my studio apartment in Queens. The family disappointment. That's what they called me. The one who'd refused grandfather's money to prove a point, the stubborn idealist who wanted to make it on her own. What they didn't know was that I hadn't refused anything. I'd been systematically excluded, written off as unworthy long before I'd even had a chance to ask for help. Inside the conference room, crystal chandeliers cast expensive light over the massive table where my family had already claimed their seats. I took the empty chair at the far end, as far from everyone as possible. Attorney Hastings, a silver-haired man in his 60s who'd known our family for 30 years, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time." Victoria actually checked her phone during his opening remarks. Cameron was already calculating something on a notepad. Neither had shed a single tear at grandfather's funeral 3 days earlier. "William Ashford's estate," Hastings began, "is valued at approximately $2.3 billion. The number hung in the air like a promise. I watched my mother's eyes glitter with anticipation. "To my son, Richard Ashford," Hastings read, "I leave the summer estate in the Hamptons, valued at $45 million, plus a trust fund of $100 million. Dad actually smiled. Mom squeezed his hand. "To my daughter-in-law, Patricia Ashford, I leave my art collection, valued at $30 million, and a trust fund of $50 million. Mom gasped softly, pressing her hand to her chest as if overwhelmed with emotion rather than greed. "To my grandson, Cameron Ashford, I leave the commercial property portfolio in Boston, valued at $70 million, plus a trust fund of $100 million to support his business ventures." Cameron pumped his fist under the table. "I saw it. To my granddaughter, Victoria Ashford, I leave the penthouse in Milan, valued at $20 million, the yacht Serendipity, valued at $15 million, and a trust fund of $75 million. Victoria actually squealed, out loud, at a will reading. Then Hastings paused. His eyes found mine across the table, and something in his expression shifted. Not pity, but something else. Respect, maybe. Or warning. And to my granddaughter, Harper Ashford, the room went completely silent. Every head turned toward me. Cameron was already smirking. Victoria had her phone out, probably ready to live tweet my humiliation. "I leave $1. The silence shattered into laughter. Cameron didn't even try to hide it, his shoulders shaking with amusement. Victoria covered her mouth, but her eyes were dancing with malicious glee. My parents exchanged glances that said everything. See? Even Dad knew she was worthless. "However," Hastings continued, his voice cutting through the mockery, "Harper is also to receive a sealed envelope, to be opened privately, which William specifically requested she receive before leaving these premises. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table toward me. It was old, yellowed at the edges, and sealed with red wax bearing grandfather's sigil. A compass rose, the same symbol that had been on his sailing ships before he'd sold his maritime business and invested in real estate. "That's it?" Cameron asked, laughing openly now. $1 and a letter? What is she, his pen pal? Maybe it's a coupon for job training, Victoria added, and they all laughed again. I took the envelope with steady hands, refusing to let them see me shake. "Is that everything?" "For you, yes," Hastings said. Then he added so quietly I almost missed it. "For now." I stood, tucked the envelope under my arm, and walked out of that conference room with my head high. Behind me, I could hear Victoria already on the phone, probably calling her friends to gloat about her inheritance. Cameron was arguing with Dad about whether to sell the Boston properties or develop them. No one followed me out. No one said goodbye. No one even noticed when I left. Outside, I sat in my sweltering Honda and stared at the envelope. My hands were shaking now, not from humiliation but from rage. $1. My grandfather, who I'd spent every Sunday afternoon with for 20 years, who'd taught me to sail and play chess and identify constellations, had left me $1. The envelope was thick, heavy. Whatever was inside wasn't just a letter. I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter on grandfather's personal stationery, his distinctive angular script covering both sides of the page. But there was something else, too. A folded piece of aged paper that looked like it had been drawn by hand. A map. Drop a comment if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, because what I found in that envelope changed everything. My dearest Harper, if you're reading this, then you've just endured what I can only imagine was a humiliating will reading. You've watched your family celebrate inheritances they didn't earn, money they'll waste, properties they'll squander. You've been mocked, dismissed, and written off as the family failure. Good. Everything that just happened was by design. I needed them to believe you received nothing. I needed them to underestimate you one final time, just as they've underestimated you your entire life. The truth is, Harper, you're the only one in this family I trust. You're the only one who worked for what you have. The only one who chose integrity over easy money. The only one who ever asked me how I was doing instead of how much I was worth. What I'm about to tell you must remain secret until the time is right. The envelope contains a map to something I've kept hidden for 40 years. A piece of property that doesn't appear in any will, any trust document, or any public record. It's not registered under my name, your father's name, or the name of any Ashford. It's registered under your mother's maiden name, Patricia Morrison, in a blind trust I established in 1983. She has no idea it exists. No one does, except you now. The property is a 300-acre island off the coast of Maine called Ravens Point. I purchased it through a series of shell corporations when I was your age, using money I'd saved from my first maritime ventures. It was my sanctuary, my escape from the demands of business and family. The island has a fully functional lighthouse, a cottage, a private dock, and most importantly, it has something else. Beneath the lighthouse, accessible only during low tide, is a natural cave system. Inside the largest cave, sealed in waterproof containers, you'll find what amounts to my real legacy. Original deeds to properties in Manhattan that I purchased in the 1970s and 1980s before the real estate boom, which I never registered under Ashford Holdings. Stock certificates for companies I invested in early, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, which I never reported to the IRS because I purchased them under false names during a period when I was, let's say, ethically flexible. There's also approximately $12 million in physical gold bars, purchased with cash over a period of 20 years, which I stored there as insurance against economic collapse. The conservative estimate of the island's value, plus the Manhattan properties, plus the stock certificates, plus the gold, approximately $800 million. None of it is recorded anywhere. None of it can be claimed by anyone except the person whose name is on the blind trust, Patricia Morrison. Which is to say, no one, because your mother doesn't know about it. But you do now. The map will show you how to access the island. The coordinates are marked. The key to the lighthouse is hidden in a specific location I've marked with an X. Inside the lighthouse, in the eastern room on the second floor, you'll find a loose floorboard beneath the window. Under it is a lockbox containing all the documentation you need: property deeds, stock certificates, and instructions for accessing the trust. Here's what I want you to do, Harper. Take your time. Study the assets. Make a plan. You're a researcher. This is what you're trained for. Don't rush. Don't let emotion drive your decisions. And when you're ready, when you've positioned yourself correctly, you can do one of two things. You can take everything and disappear, live a quiet, wealthy life far away from this toxic family. Or you can use this knowledge as leverage to reshape everything, to claim what's rightfully yours and watch them scramble when they realize what they've lost. The choice is entirely yours. You've earned it. I'm sorry I couldn't give you this in person. I'm sorry you had to endure their mockery one more time. But I needed them to believe you were defeated. I needed them to think they'd won. Because the Ashfords only respect power, Harper. And you're about to have more of it than any of them ever imagined. Use it wisely. Make me proud. With all my love, Grandfather. I read the letter 3 times, sitting in my car with tears streaming down my face. Not from sadness, but from the sheer overwhelming weight of what I'd just inherited. Not $1, $800 million. And none of them knew. The map was detailed, hand-drawn in Grandfather's careful script. The island was located near Bar Harbor, Maine, about 6 hours north of New York. The coordinates were precise. The hiding place for the lighthouse key was marked clearly. Inside a fake rock near the dock, 3rd stone from the left on the eastern side. I looked at my phone. It was 2 p.m. on a Thursday. I had the weekend off from the library. The barista job could survive without me for a few days. I started the Honda, the engine coughing to life, and began the drive north. Ravens Point was exactly where Grandfather said it would be. I'd rented a small motorboat in Bar Harbor, telling the marina owner I was a marine biologist doing research on seabird populations. He'd given me a knowing look. Tourists always had elaborate lies about why they wanted to visit the islands, but took my cash without question. The island rose from the Atlantic like something out of a Gothic novel. Rocky cliffs, dense pine forests, and at the highest point, a white lighthouse with a red cap, exactly as Grandfather had described. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time, which was exactly the point. I found the fake rock where he'd said it would be. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture, was an old-fashioned iron key. The lighthouse door opened with a creak that echoed across the empty island. Inside, everything was frozen in time. 1980s furniture, nautical charts on the walls, a wood-burning stove, shelves lined with books. It was clear Grandfather had spent time here, perhaps even recently. The air smelled of salt and old paper and something else. Possibility. I climbed the narrow spiral staircase to the 2nd floor. The eastern room had a single window overlooking the ocean. I knelt beside it and found the loose floorboard exactly where he'd marked it on the map. The lockbox was heavy, made of reinforced steel. It opened with a combination Grandfather had written in the letter's margin. Aero 4/15, 1959. My grandmother's birthday. Inside were stacks of documents. Property deeds for buildings in Soho and Tribeca that were now worth tens of millions each. Stock certificates that made my hands shake. 10,000 shares of Apple purchased in 1982. 5,000 shares of Microsoft from 1986. 2,500 shares of Amazon from 1997. Even without calculating the exact value, I knew these were worth a fortune. And beneath the documents, a smaller box containing a single key card and a handwritten note. Bank of Switzerland, Zurich. Account number 749-3827-001. Personal identification required. Your birth certificate and passport will suffice. A Swiss bank account. Of course, Grandfather had a Swiss bank account. I sat on the floor of that lighthouse for 3 hours, reading through every document, understanding exactly what I now controlled. The properties alone were worth at least $400 million. The stocks, with their decades of splits and growth, were worth another $350 million, maybe more. The gold Grandfather mentioned was in the cave system below, but I hadn't accessed it yet. But more than the money, I had information. I had leverage. I had proof that Grandfather had hidden assets that my family would desperately want to claim, and they had no idea any of it existed. I took photos of every document with my phone, uploaded them to an encrypted cloud server, then carefully returned everything to the lockbox. I wanted the originals to remain here, safe, while I figured out my next move. The drive back to New York took 7 hours. I stopped at a diner in New Hampshire, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and made a list. Option 1. Claim everything quietly, transfer the stocks into my name through the Swiss account. Sell the properties through shell corporations. Take the gold. Disappear. live comfortably for the rest of my life, and never speak to my family again. Option 2, use this as leverage. Let them know what I've found. Watch them scramble. Negotiate from a position of absolute power. Option 3, something else, something bigger. Something that would not only claim what was mine, but reshape the entire family dynamic. By the time I reached Queens, I knew what I was going to do. I waited 2 weeks before making my move. During that time, I did my research. I hired a discreet attorney in Boston, someone with no connection to Hastings and Crane or the Ashford family, and had her verify the authenticity of every document. I contacted a private equity firm about the potential sale of the Manhattan properties. I opened my own Swiss bank account and arranged for the transfer of the stock certificates. Everything grandfather had left me was real, legitimate, and more valuable than even he'd estimated. The stocks alone, after 40 years of growth and splits, were worth $487 million. The Manhattan properties in today's market were valued at $623 million. The gold in the cave, which I'd hired a private security firm to retrieve and transport to a secure facility, was worth another $18 million. Total, $1.128 billion. More than my father received, more than Cameron, more than any single person in that will reading. On a Tuesday morning, I called a family meeting. I told them I needed to discuss grandfather's estate, that I'd discovered something important they needed to know about. To my surprise, they agreed immediately, probably thinking I was going to beg for money, or contest the will, or do something equally pathetic and easy to dismiss. We met at my parents' penthouse on the Upper East Side, the one grandfather had purchased for them in 1995. The view overlooked Central Park, a vista worth tens of millions all by itself. They were all there: Mom, Dad, Cameron, Victoria. They'd dressed casually, which told me they didn't consider this a serious meeting. Cameron wore a t-shirt that probably cost $300. Victoria had her phone out, scrolling through Instagram while we waited for everyone to settle. "So," Dad began, not even offering me a seat. "What's this about, Harper? If you're here to complain about the will, I'm here to make an offer," I said, cutting him off. That got their attention. Victoria actually looked up from her phone. I pulled out my laptop, opened it on the coffee table, and turned the screen so they could all see. On it was a spreadsheet I'd prepared, listing every asset from Ravens Point, every stock certificate, every property deed, every single thing grandfather had hidden. "What am I looking at?" Mom asked, squinting at the screen. "You're looking at $1.1 billion in assets that grandfather owned but never reported. Assets that don't appear in his will, aren't part of his estate, and legally belong to a blind trust he established in 1983. The room went completely silent. "That's impossible," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's very possible. I have the documentation right here." I pulled out a folder containing copies of the deeds and certificates. Properties in Manhattan worth over $600 million. Stock certificates in major tech companies worth almost $500 million. Physical gold worth $18 million. All of it hidden in a property he purchased under a false name 40 years ago. Cameron grabbed the folder, flipping through it frantically. "Where did you get these?" "Grandfather left me instructions. In that envelope you all thought was worthless." Victoria's face had gone pale. "You're saying you inherited over $1 billion? "Not exactly," I said, and paused for effect. "See, the trust isn't in grandfather's name. It's in Mom's maiden name, Patricia Morrison, which means legally, technically, the assets belong to her." Mom's eyes went wide. "What? But you didn't know about the trust, did you, Mom? Which means you never claimed it, never reported it, never paid taxes on it, which could be problematic." Dad stood abruptly. "This is insane. You're making this up. There's no way William hid $1 billion. "Call Hastings," I said calmly. "Ask him if grandfather ever mentioned Ravens Point. Ask him about the Patricia Morrison Trust. Or better yet, call the Bank of Switzerland and ask about account 749-3827-001. The silence that followed told me everything. Dad was already calculating. Cameron was staring at the property deeds like they might disappear. Victoria had tears in her eyes, not from emotion, but from rage. "Here's my offer," I continued. "I'm willing to split the assets. Not evenly, because let's be honest, I'm the one who found them. I'm the one grandfather trusted with this information, and I'm the one who's been systematically excluded from this family's wealth for my entire adult life. Split them how? Mom asked, her voice barely a whisper. I keep 800 million. The remaining 328 million gets divided among the four of you. That's 82 million each, more than what some of you received in the will. Cameron laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You think we're going to agree to that? You think we'll just let you take 800 million? The alternative, I said, speaking over him, is that I claim everything. The trust is in Mom's name, but Mom didn't know about it. I have documentation proving grandfather intended it for me. I have his letter, in his handwriting, explaining everything. I have witnesses who can verify he and I met privately for years. And most importantly, I have possession of the assets. The stocks have already been transferred into my name through the Swiss account. The properties are already listed with a private equity firm for sale. The gold is in a secure facility that only I can access. I closed the laptop. So you can either accept my generous offer of $82 million each, or you can try to fight me in court for years while I liquidate everything and you get nothing. Your choice. Comment below if you've ever had to fight for what you deserved, and don't forget to subscribe for the conclusion of this story. The legal battle took 8 months. They fought, of course, hired expensive attorneys, filed injunctions, tried to freeze the assets. But grandfather had been meticulous in his planning. The trust documents were ironclad. The blind trust structure was legal, if ethically questionable. And most importantly, I had possession. My attorney, a brilliant woman named Rebecca Chen, advised me carefully. They'll try to prove undue influence, she warned. They'll say William wasn't in his right mind when he created the trust, that you manipulated him. Let them try, I said. I have 20 years of Sunday afternoon visits. I have letters. I have photos. I have witnesses from the sailing club where we used to meet who can testify to our relationship. In the end, it was Mom who broke first. She called me on a Tuesday night, her voice shaking. Harper, please. Can we talk? Just the two of us? We met at a neutral location, a small cafe in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's watchful eyes. She looked older than I remembered, worn down by stress and legal fees. I didn't know, she said immediately. I swear I didn't know about any of this. Your grandfather never told me. I know. Then why? Why put it in my name? Because he knew none of you would think to look for assets under Morrison instead of Ashford. It was the perfect hiding place, right under your nose. She flinched. That's cruel. Is it? More cruel than leaving me out of family events? More cruel than telling people I was a disappointment? More cruel than laughing when I received $1? Tears slid down her cheeks. Real ones this time, not the performative kind I'd seen at the will reading. I'm sorry, she whispered. You're right. We were horrible to you. I was horrible to you. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. What did I ever do to deserve it? She was silent for a long time, staring into her coffee. You reminded me of who I used to be, she finally said. Before the money, before the Ashford name. I was Patricia Morrison, a girl from a middle-class family in New Jersey who worked her way through college. I was proud of that. But after I married your father, I had to become someone else. Someone who cared about status and appearances and inheritance. And you refused to do that. You kept being yourself, working hard, living modestly, and it made me ashamed. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I'll accept your offer, she said. 82 million. I'll convince your father and your siblings to accept it too. I can't lose everything to legal fees fighting over money I didn't even know existed. Okay, I said simply. Can I ask you something? Sure. What are you going to do with it, with all that money? I smiled. Whatever grandfather would have wanted, I'm going to build something real. Maybe fund scholarships for kids like me, the ones their families underestimate. Maybe invest in small businesses that need capital but don't have connections. Maybe just live quietly and never have to worry about money again. That sounds like William, she said softly. He always said the best revenge was living well. It's not revenge, Mom. It's justice. There's a difference. The settlement was finalized on a cold December morning, exactly 1 year after grandfather's death. My family each received $82 million, transferred into accounts I'd set up with strict conditions. No access to the principal for 5 years, managed by a financial advisor I'd personally vetted, with quarterly reports to ensure they weren't squandering it. I kept $802 million. After taxes and legal fees, I'd end up with around $450 million, which was still more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But more than the money, I'd gained something else. Freedom. Freedom from their judgment, their expectations, their cruelty. Freedom to build the life I wanted, on my terms. I sold the Manhattan properties to a development group for $680 million, more than their appraised value, because I'd negotiated brilliantly. I donated the island to a marine conservation nonprofit, with the stipulation that the lighthouse remain preserved exactly as grandfather left it. And I kept the stocks, which continued to grow. I moved into a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, nothing ostentatious, just comfortable, and furnished it with pieces I'd collected from estate sales and thrift stores. I quit both my jobs and enrolled in a PhD program in library science, something I'd always wanted to do but could never afford. And sometimes, on Sunday afternoons, I'd drive up to Bar Harbor and take a boat out to where Ravens Point used to be. The conservation group had installed a small plaque near the lighthouse, in memory of William Ashford, who believed some treasures are worth hiding. My family and I maintain a cordial distance now. We exchange emails on holidays. Victoria occasionally texts me, usually when she needs advice about investments. Cameron actually apologized once, drunk at 2 a.m., leaving me a rambling voicemail about how he'd wasted his life chasing Dad's approval. I forgave them, eventually. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. The last time I saw Dad, he asked me if I thought grandfather had been fair, if I thought he'd done the right thing, hiding all that wealth, humiliating them at the will reading, orchestrating everything from beyond the grave. I thought about it carefully before answering. He gave each of you exactly what you valued most, I said. You valued money, status, properties, things, so that's what you got. I valued him, our relationship, our conversations, our time together. And he gave me the thing that mattered most to him, his trust. Dad nodded slowly. And the money? The $1 billion? That was just a bonus, I said. A test, maybe. To see what I'd do with power, with wealth, with the thing you all spent your lives chasing. And what did you do? I smiled. I'm still figuring that out. But I'm doing it on my terms, for the first time in my life. He would have been proud of you, Dad said quietly. I know, I replied. He told me so, in his letter. Now, when people ask me about my grandfather's estate, about the will reading where I inherited nothing, I tell them the truth. I inherited exactly what I needed. Not what I wanted, not what I expected, but what I needed to become the person I was meant to be. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the underestimated one in your family, drop a comment and subscribe. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the chance to prove everyone wrong. The best revenge isn't living well. It's living authentically, powerfully, and completely on your own terms. And thanks to Grandfather William, I finally could.